Believe it or not, just over 100 years ago, much of Florida's east coast was wild and untouched. Overgrown marshes and thick mangrove forests covered what are now Miami, Palm Beach, and other popular cities. Before the 1900s, Florida was mainly known for its agriculture and seafood, and hardly anyone came here for a vacation. Until Henry Morrison Flagler transformed it entirely. Henry Flagler, co-founder of Standard Oil, transformed Florida over 25 years. He built its transportation, tourism, and agriculture industries, making Florida's economy one of the largest in the U.S. His ambitious overseas railroad exemplifies his legacy. From the poorest state to a powerhouse, Florida owes much to Flagler's vision. But how, when, and where did it all start? It all began on January 2, 1830, when Henry Morrison Flagler was born, in Hopewell Junction, New York, to Reverend and Mrs. Isaac Flagler. The Flagler family came from the Palatinate region in southwestern Germany. Coming from a modest background, Henry left New York for Republic, Ohio in 1844, a small town of about 1,000 people. Thanks to family connections, he landed a job at a general store, where his hard work quickly paid off, raising his salary from $5 to $12 a month within 10 months. This was just the start of his lifelong financial success. After a few moves, Henry ended up in Bellevue, Ohio, working in the mercantile business with the Harkness side of his family. By 1852, he had become a partner and expanded the business to include grain trading. Around this time, he married Mary Harkness, the daughter of Mr. Harkness. However, in 1860, he faced his only business failure with a salt venture. After the Civil War, the demand for salt dropped big time, causing the company to go under. Flagler took a hard hit, losing not just his own money but also the funds he had borrowed. So he packed up and went back to Bellevue, Ohio, basically starting over from scratch. He moved to Saginaw, Michigan, and entered an industry he didn't fully understand. This led to debt that took him years to pay off, but he eventually bounced back, showing his determination and resilience. It was a tough blow, but it set the stage for his incredible comeback later on. In 1867, Henry joined forces with Rockefeller and Andrews, diving into the oil business. His specialty was transportation. He arranged for Pennsylvania oil to be shipped to Cleveland for refining, and then sent to New York for sale. Henry was great at getting sweet deals with the railroads and even managed to charge taxes on competitors using the railroads, with those taxes secretly going to Standard Oil. You could call Henry shrewd, but not cutthroat. He just made the smartest moves for his company, and sometimes for others. For example, he loved a German bakery in Cleveland. When the owner decided to sell the bakery to get into oil refining, Henry bought the refinery from him. Instead of just paying cash, Henry gave the baker something more valuable: financial advice. The baker used some of the money to clear debts and took the rest in Standard Oil stock, along with a job with the company. His salary grew to $8,000 a year, and his stock's value skyrocketed from $2,500 to $50,000, and that's a lot of dough. Now comes the time to know how Flagler and Florida got a major glow-up in the winter of 1883 to 84. So at that time, Florida was the go-to vacation spot for fancy people from the Northeast. Even doctors recommend going there to people with pulmonary disorders. But it was a whole mission just to get there. Trains, cab, ferry, cab, train, and another cab just to go from Jacksonville to St. Augustine. It was too intense. But Flagler, being the visionary he was, saw some major potential in the Sunshine State. Now, he was already sitting on a mountain of cash at the age of 53, but he felt the need to get more. He knew the key to unlocking Florida's full potential was making it easier for people to get there. So he did what any boss would do and brought up this old narrow-gauge train line that ran from Jacksonville to St. Augustine. But it was outdated and not compatible with the bigger rail lines that were popping up everywhere. So did Flagler just sit back? Nope, he upgraded that line himself, making it one smooth ride from the big cities up north straight to St. Augustine. Now, St. Augustine was already a pretty cool spot with its historic feel and scenic views, but Flagler had bigger dreams for it. That's when he crossed paths with Andrew Anderson, a Princeton grad who believed strictly in the potential of his hometown. These two hit it off well and decided to create something legendary. And that's when they gave birth to the concept of the Ponce de Leon Hotel. Flagler let Anderson handle the local stuff and went back up north. Flagler was an innovator in the business world. His smart senses and creativity helped him build this financial empire that's still killing it today. But the Ponce de Leon was his passion project. He wanted it to be straight-up art. So he picked the two up-and-coming architects, Thomas Hastings and John Carrere, to give the oldest city in the nation a major renovation. These two architects had studied in Paris and had that perfect mix of old-school training and new-school vibes. Thomas was from New York, and John was from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Flagler sent them off to Spain to get inspired by the OG vibes. They stayed true to the classic style of St Augustine, with its coquina shell concrete and hanging balconies, and also brought in some Euro flair with rotundas and frescoes. And they even added electric lighting to make the hotel feel both old school and futuristic at the same time. So after the huge success of the Ponce de Leon, Alcazar, and the Cordova in St Augustine, Flagler must have thought, what should he do next? And of course, he had big plans. So he headed south to build hotels in Ormond and Palm Beach. He didn't just stick to hotels, he also stepped into different industries. He started a steamer service along the Halifax River, making it easier for the citrus industry to reach northern markets, which was a pretty move, because a stronger economy means a more lit community, which makes his fancy hotels even fancier. On the shores of Lake Worth and Palm Beach, Flagler built the Royal Point Sienna, a 6-story hotel for 2,000 guests on 32 acres. During its construction, the big freeze of 1894 to 95 wrecked local crops. Flagler financially helped local farmers and sent James E. Ingram to assess the damage. Surprisingly, Miami's crops were unaffected. However, Ingram returned with an invite from Mrs. Julia D. Tuttle, urging Flagler to invest in Biscayne Bay. And you know Flagler was always on the move, so the railroad kept pushing southward. So, up north in Florida, Flagler showcased his class with some incredible projects. But down in Miami, he took things to the next level. He wasn't just building a hotel, he was creating a whole atmosphere. He laid out streets, built waterworks, an electric light plant, and even homes for the workers. And guess what? Miami's population tripled within 4 years of Flagler rolling into town. He basically gave Miami its big break. But it gets even more interesting. Flagler had this fantastic idea to connect the Florida Keys with bridges. These keys stretch for 128 miles between the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico. And Flagler was all in on this plan. He saw the Panama Canal was up and running and figured if he could bridge the Keys, Key West could be the spot for major international trade. So he and his team faced tons of challenges and setbacks, but they didn't back down. The project was massive. They had to bridge and dredge almost 75 miles of waterways, which is insane. They even mixed concrete on barges and used boom derricks to put it all together. And let's not forget about the hurricanes. They dealt with 4 of them. And sadly, 130 people lost their lives. But after 8 long years, they made it happen. The first passenger train rolled into Key West on January 22, 1912. And now, Flagler's name is everywhere in Florida for a reason. He spent some serious cash on his projects. The hotels alone cost $12 million, while the railroad to Homestead set him back another $18 million. Whereas the Key West extension was almost $20 million. He spent a total of $50 million, and his estate was valued at $100 million. Whether you think he did it for business, legacy, or just to be a real one thing's for sure. Florida owes a lot to the tycoon who started as a $5 a month store clerk. At last, Flagler's journey ended suddenly at 83, after falling from stairs on May 20th, 1913. He left behind the incredible Overseas Railway, whose pillars now support the Overseas Highway. Flagler rests beside his daughter in the St Augustine church he built. His stunning Ponce de Leon Hotel is now Flagler College, one of America's most beautiful buildings. It's hard to believe that a guy who dedicated his life to exploring and building stuff would go out any other way. Felt like he was ready to let go of this life to see what was up in the great unknown beyond.